Hey my friends, Steve Dempster, Dempster Guitar Studio, back at you with issue number 12 in our series. And we're still on the topic of intervals. We haven't completely finished that yet. You should be getting quite comfortable looking at the intervals from the point of view of between two notes within the scale. And again, I'll just review this for you. This is what we've been talking about. You've got on the good old C major scale that we've been sticking to, that sucker. You're now seeing the tone, the semitone, the tone, the tone, the tone, the semitone. And you've also seen that same formula play itself out when you're crossing strings. So if I play this instead, which is exactly the same as this, if the linear one goes tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, and the one that crosses strings sounds exactly the same, it has to be built the same way with tones and semitones. And so we looked at that as well. We saw the tone from C to D, and then we saw the tone cross from D to E. And that's what it looked like. You have to have that sort of stuck in your mind. And then we saw the semitone and the tone, and then we crossed strings again, and then a tone, and then finally another semitone. So hopefully between those two you're starting to see at least a few of the intervals that we can discuss in scale structure. But there is a different way, an alternative way to look at intervals, and that is, instead of comparing intervals between groups of notes as we work our way up a scale, which does define the scale formula, we can look at notes from the root, or not notes, we can look at intervals from the root of the scale. In other words, just as you learned the scale formula going across the strings, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 and semitone, let's now number the notes. Keep the notes in mind as you're going through the scale. Try to keep them at the back of your brain here, but number them like 1 through 7, simple as that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1 again for now. And what then will happen is we can compare intervals from the root, which is the first note of the scale. So we want to start that process in this video. So here we go. We're going to analyze this first along the string linearly, as usual, because I think it's good for the brain to see that it's not only going this way on the guitar, but it's going that, keep hitting the strings, it's going that way on the guitar. I think that's good for a general understanding of how the fretboard is laid out. Instead of just looking down upon it as seeing a bunch of metal bars and strings and places that you put your fingers, there's an organization that's going on there. So we're going to go up the string first and look at the intervals in sequence. Okay, so I'll start with the C, and we're going to call that the root. You could also call it the 1, the first degree of the scale, the second degree of the scale, the third degree, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the 7th, and then the 8th. No mystery there. We covered that, I think, back in issue 7 when we were beginning to talk about chord structures. So that shouldn't be too unfamiliar with you. Okay, now let's look at the intervals from the root. You already know this one. That's a tone, and it's 2 frets up from the root. We've got that. That's the E note, C, D, E. Well, how far away is the E from the C? It's a bit of a stretch in the hand, but we don't have to stretch it out for this purpose. We just need to play the C and then the E. As you know, the way I count these is I don't count the fret that my starting finger is in. I go to the next fret up and I count from there. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 frets up until I get to that E note. And that's referred to as a major third. That's the name of that interval. And for the time being, I don't want you to be concerned with why they're called major, or why they're called minor, or why they're called perfect for now. There's a reason for it, but we don't need to confuse the issue for this video. We'll get to it later on. So far, we have a tone, or a major second. Now we have a major third. Next note in the scale would be F, C, D, E, F. There it is. So I'm going from root, or C, up to F. Da, 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 da. How many frets? From C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets to make what's called a perfect fourth. It's a name for a distance between 2 notes. Eventually, and if you want to, you can study that to the point where you recognize the sound of these intervals just like that. And we do that when we're in music school, or if you're studying through like Royal Conservatory procedures or something like that, at least here in Canada, where your ears get used to hearing these interval sounds. They're committed to memory, you develop a feel for them, and you're able to recognize them without having to go to your instrument. That's a good skill to have. It's not essential for what we're doing. Let's start with the instrument, and then we can work up maybe to helping your ear recognize these sounds. And there's some good tools to help you do that as well, which maybe I'll get into a little later. Okay, so now keep reviewing. Major second, major third, perfect fourth. Now we got to get up to the 5th note of the scale. Come back to the root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look down on your fretboard. Hopefully you recognize that it's a G. And you go C to G, C to G, and that's an interval. Da, da, that distance right there. And how many frets away are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 frets, or 7 semitones if you want to think of it that way. And so that interval is referred to as the perfect 5th, and it's 7 frets along one string from the root. This is true on any string, so the fact that I've picked the 5th string, it's just to demonstrate. Okay, so we've got the 5th note. Let's go and find the 6th note. What is it? C, D, E, F, G, A. There it is, way up at the 12th fret. So again, we're looking back at C, up to A. Da, 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 da. That's an interval. Every distance between 2 notes in music is an interval, and it has a name. This one happens to be called the major 6th. It's not a perfect 6th or anything like that. It's called a major 6th. How many frets away? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 frets. Simple. Then we've got to get from A to B, which would be 2 frets higher. Now we're going C to B, C to B, And again, it's hard to tap it way up there. C to B, C to B. It's quite a leap. We're almost done. And now we have to number how many frets away we are for that guy. Eventually what happens is if you're using them a lot linearly, you just simply recognize the distances quite quickly and are able to go to where you want to go in control with knowledge of what you're doing, as opposed to simply going to this fret on the 5th string. It has some information encoded in that statement, but there's not a lot. It's just telling you where to go to find that sound. You're not able to do it based on a bigger context, which, as you know, I keep reiterating in this series. The point is to help you understand this new thing because you understood that thing that came before it. If you understand this well, this will make sense. If you don't have any access to this thing, this might make sense, but more likely it doesn't make sense. All right, C to B. How many frets? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 frets from a C to a B note. That's called a major 7th. We're at the 7th note of the scale at that point. And the note right next door, a semitone higher, is an octave C. We went from the B note and we go a semitone higher to C. Because why? B and C are side by side. I told you that at the very beginning of the series. It is the truth. So, and of course you probably hear it in my voice, I'm still a bit croaky from this cold. Getting better, but we're good. So, B to C. And that, of course, forms another interval, a very unique interval referred to as the octave. Some call it the perfect octave. We'll just call it the octave. Just like that. Now, if I play the scale numerically, like I just did, thinking root, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1 again, the octave higher. If that sound is what it is, and then I go and play it in position like this, the exact same pitches, root, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Now you do hear a difference, don't you? Let me see if I can sing it and hold my voice without cracking. Da, da, there it is. Da, da. They're the same pitch, but because one of the strings is really thick and the other one is really thin, as I talked about in the previous video, they have a different color. So you mustn't let that confuse your ear regarding pitch. Does that make sense? The same thing. So that means, just like again in the previous video, if we can do that linearly and it sounds identical going across position, it means we must be able to find those intervals as well going across the strings. And we can. And it looks like this. And again, this is all in the PDF that accompanies the video. So if you have trouble following along with my playing hand here, just refer to the PDF and you'll be cool. So we've got root, or 1, moving to the 2, which is a D. Then I'm reaching for the 3rd note of the scale. 1, 2, 3. You see that? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 7. And then the octave again. So, 1 to 2, that's cool. That's the major 2nd. You know this, or the tone. Then I go from root to 3. 3rd note of the scale from the root. That sound is the same as this sound. And if you recall, we called that the major 3rd, and it was 4 frets up from where my first finger is. Well, if that's a major 3rd, and this sounds the same, that has to be a major 3rd as well. Don't worry about why it's major. Really don't pay attention to that right now. Okay, major third. Go up to the next fret, and from the root, we called that a perfect fourth. Here it is crossing strings, same fret, different strings. That's all it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, root to second, root to third, root to fourth. Or 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4. Major second, major third, perfect fourth. Let's continue. Root to 5. Root to 5. There it is there. Perfect fifth is the name of that. That's a perfect fifth. And that's 7 frets up. I'm going to confirm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 frets up. I'm going to keep reiterating this. Major second, major third from the root, perfect fourth from the root, perfect fifth from the root. Sorry. That's the 6th note of the scale. From the root, that's a major 6. That's the sound of it. From the root up to the next note, which is a B, there it is. That's a major 7th, and then finally the octave. So you get this, instead of thinking of it like tone, 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 semitone, tone, 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 semitone, or tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 and semitone. You're thinking of it, thinking of the distances only from the root, and we create these interval distances. Major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, perfect major 6, major 7, and then the octave. And there's all kind, we can do, you know, that kind of stuff to help practice our fingers and get them all healthy just by practicing those intervals. I hope that's making sense so far. Some of these I can play, let's say, at the same time. If I go, I did that from G. I should have done it from C. So it's the same thing, right? C to D, D to E, or C to E, sorry. C to F, C to G, C to A, C to B, C to G. The relationship is identical. I started on the 6th string, and I shouldn't have. I wanted to start on the 5th string instead. My bad. So, C to D, major second, C to E, major third, C to F, perfect fourth, C to G, perfect fifth, C to A, major 6th, C to B, major 7, C to C, octave. Make sense? Now I have to admit, as we've been getting further and further into the series, and I talk about this in the PDF, I gave myself a moment to rant a little bit. And it's usually regarding the fact that when people are being introduced to this sort of material, they almost always wonder why they're being shown it, because to their mind right now it doesn't appear as if it's very useful, especially when they are just interested in playing tunes. And I get that. On the surface it doesn't appear like it's very useful, but go through the rant and read up on my justifications for knowing this stuff. And if you agree, thank you. If you don't agree, hey, leave a comment down below and let me know. These kinds of discussions need to happen because in my world, anything extra that you can learn about anything in your playing is going to only help you play better. It never pulls you down, contrary to some people's opinion where they, oh, I don't need this so-called theory stuff. I just like to play what's in my heart. You're welcome to do that. On the other hand, if you're really serious about understanding the guitar, usually that's just not enough to get yourself through it. Any more than, sort of randomly feeling your way through an engine as a so-called mechanic without actually knowing the parts that make it up and how they interconnect together. You just go, I didn't bother reading that book on engine study. I just kind of feel my way through and fix things as I go. You might be good at it, but chances are you're not that good at it. Anyway, read the rant, let me know what you think. So what you end up with, if you adopt this approach to adding some more intervals into your knowledge base, is these shapes that you begin to recognize, the relationship. So that's obvious. That's a tone. Anywhere. Doesn't matter where you are. But when you play this shape, that's from C to E, that's the major third, and play them together, that's a nice sound. C to D, if I did this, I can pull this off for you. Here's what it sounds like. C to D, but I'm doing it on the 6th string. Hear that together. It's a little rough, but C to E is quite nice. Nice sound. And that's the sound of a major third. Perfect fourth has a nice sound to it. Not as harmonically pretty, but still very nice. There's the third. There's the perfect fourth. Here's the perfect fifth. Now what's that? What is that? Perfect fifth is the power chord. How many people have learned the guitar and played that shape and just refer to it as a power chord, when in fact, in truth, it's not a chord at all. It's an interval, and the interval is called a perfect fifth. We can call the chord a 5 chord, but technically speaking, it isn't a chord because we only have 2 notes. We need 3 separate notes, 3 different notes to officially make a chord if you're going to be really sticky about the definition. But that interval anyway should be quite familiar to you. If you play the major 6th, that's also quite nice. That's a pretty sound. Very nice sound. Major 7th played from the root. It's a bit rough. But, no. Smashing Pumpkins. I forget the name of the tune. It starts with a major 7th. Da, da, da. I think it's Smashing Pumpkins, and I forget the name of the tune. Please let me know if you remember it. And then, of course, the octave. So here you get these sounds. Major 2nd, not so nice. 3rd, major 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, major 6th, major 7, octave. If I play from G instead of C, if I do the same shape, the same relationships hold. Major 2nd, major 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, major 6, major 7, and I've got myself the major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And in sound. Can't do the major second because I don't have any extra strings to find that higher A on, but there it is. Major third, nice. Perfect fourth, perfect fifth, perfect sixth, major seven, octave, fine. Move to the next string, build the major scale from there. Same thing. 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 6, 1, 7, and 1 and 1. If I play that same shape or pattern from the fourth string, I don't get the same major scale sound. Listen to this. It's exactly the same shape. It's kind of a cool sound, but it's not a major scale sound. Something's wrong with the tuning at this point. Well, there's nothing wrong with the tuning. I haven't adapted to the tuning properly. Here's what has to happen. Watch this carefully. This part is the same. That's cool. If I stay with the original pattern, I'll just move my first finger here and then finish it off. But it doesn't sound right. Turns out what I have to do is take whatever I'm playing on the second string as I go from the third string to the second string, and I've got to raise it up a fret. The whole thing. Watch. Here it comes. I'm raising up. Now it sounds like a major scale. The reason that has to happen is because of the tuning between the G and the B strings. Everything in the guitar is tuned to fourth, starting from the low string to the high string. And when you get to the third string, it's a third. So check it out. E to A, E, F, G, A, 4. Turns out to be a perfect fourth. Don't worry about that, it's a fourth. A to D, A, B, C, D, that's a fourth. D, E, F, G, that's a fourth. G, A, B, G, A, B, that's a third. So this distance from the third string to the second string is actually smaller by 1 fret than the other strings are. And that means as you cross over that little weird zone on the guitar, you always have to compensate for that, whether it's chords or solo playing, anything. Same is true with intervals. For example, if I take, let's do this, if I take a major third and play it on the 6th and 5th string, that's what it looks like. And we know this already. If I take the major third and play it on the 5th and 4th string, that's what it sounds like. So, do, re, mi, that one's good. If I start on the 5th string, da, 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 1, 2, 3, that works. If I go to the 4th string and do it again, 1, 2, 3, da, da, that works. Now if I take the same shape and do it on the 3rd and 2nd string, listen to this. It doesn't sound right. In fact, what has to happen is whatever I do on the 2nd string that I would normally have done in the previous little examples, I have to bring the sound of that string up by 1 fret to make it sound right. Da, da, da. Once you've done that, then you can go back to the original shape as you go from the 2nd string to the 1st string. And that can be a bit confusing for people when they first get introduced to it. It just means everything you do when you cross that little zone changes. Let me give you another example. I'll use power chords. I've done this a lot. This is a 5th. G to D, that's a 5th. G, A, B, C, D, 5 notes apart. My goodness, it's a very simple process. It's not difficult to understand. Do the same thing from 5 to 4. This is a C to a G. There's the sound of it. Sounds okay. F to C. Now watch the 3rd finger. As I cross to the 3rd and 2nd string, whatever I would have been doing with my third finger, although I'm sitting on the second string, it now has to be raised up by 1 fret to accomplish the same sound. So that's the look of a power chord as you cross from the third to the second string. Otherwise, it was the standard look that most people are familiar with. And then when you get back to the second and first, you can come back to your original shape. So that thing, whether you've realized this or not, in your playing, it always has to be accounted for. It's happening when you go from an E chord to an A, and from an A to a D. Whether you realize it or not, you have been accommodating for that second string. And maybe I can talk about that in another session. But I just want you to be aware of it, that there's that little sort of no man land that we have to traverse, and we have to get good at anticipating what's going to happen when we cross there going up strings and when we're coming back down in sound too. So even though I had the rant going on about, you know, why this stuff is good to know and important to know, a good place to start to see how applicable this is using stuff you've probably already been using, you just haven't thought of it this way. So I have some examples in the PDF. I'll just quickly go through them for you to give you a sense. So if you just grabbed a C chord, standard C chord, and I want you to focus on my first finger, and if I then go and add my pinky onto the second string third fret, most people would call this a C add 9 chord. It's very pretty. Sometimes they play it this way, so they can get back and forth to a G chord real easily. So that's C to C add 9. It could be called, now this might make you really crazy or might give you some great insight. It could be called C add 2, because you're going from, in the C major scale, from a C note to a D note, which is a tone away. You know, you have this effect. It has the second, in this context, has become known as the ninth. Again, I'm not going to talk about why that's the case right now, but I do want you to realize that the ninth is really the same as the 2. And there's some good reason to call it the ninth instead of the 2. But I still want you to think of it as the major second that's going on here. Okay, so that's pretty simple. That you can see that interval happening. Of course, if you play a regular C chord, if you look at your third and your second finger and just play them, you got your major third right there. It's built into the C chord. That major third is also hinting as to the major C chord itself, why it's called that. Now if you took a C chord again and replaced that second finger with your fourth finger on the same string, third fret, nice sound. This sound is a C sus4 chord, or C sus chord. And you can hear it, as we say in the music business, you can hear it resolve back to the third. And if you look down at your hand when you're playing that chord, your third and pinky are playing the shape of a perfect fourth. You can see that right in the chord. It's this effect. Like in The Who. What is it? Pinball Wizard, right? That effect. Okay? The perfect fifth is just the power chord. And I'm sure many of you have been playing that sound a lot. If you took the C chord and added the A here on the third string, second fret, you have to refinger it. So you still have the body of the C chord, but you've added an A to it. the chord itself is called C6, but if you took away the second and the first finger, whoop, then you're left with, right there, the pinky and the third, which is that shape. And you can see the sixth, the major sixth, is inside of that chord. This kind of exploration should be giving you a sense that chords are built not only from notes, individual notes, but certain intervallic relationships. And I'll say this, it's those interval relationships that come together in a certain way that cause us to name the chord as major, or minor, or diminished, or augmented, or dominant. It's the combining of certain intervals within the chord, by definition, that tell us, therefore, that chord is a minor one or a major one. If, for example, you want to play, or you played a C major 7 chord, this is a pretty common one. It's quite nice. Again, if we just get rid of the pinky and the third finger, there's that major 7th that's embedded in the chord. You've been doing it all along. And in fact, you know, you can see there's even a major 3rd in there. So again, you can see these things starting to happen within the chords that you're already playing. And then finally, if you played a C bar chord, well, within that, if you get rid of your second and your pinky, you've got your octave. So again, this is a game of perspective. Whether you realize it or not, you've been using these things all along. And again, the better off you can recognize them, you can hear them, you know them, you're comfortable with them in many different scenarios. It's just kind of fun to know that enough that you're in control of what you're doing. So there we have it. We've got intervals that you can do between consecutive notes of a scale to help identify the interval formula. 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 frets, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret. I said that wrong. Major second, minor second, major second, major second, major second, minor second. Or tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. That's one perspective. And then the other one is to do all the interval exploration from the root. In the major scale, you only get major and perfect intervals. You get the major second interval, whoops, major second. You get the major third from the root. Perfect fourth, perfect fifth, perfect 6, major 6, major 7, and then the octave. Minor scales would be a different structure, diminished scales would be a different structure. Way the game goes, it never really stops, and that's the fun part. Your learning goes on forever. Well, there you have it, another perspective on intervals. We can keep on going for a little while and cover some other ones, but I only wanted to cover that for the time being, to get your brain starting to think a bit about how intervals function, how they work within the scale crossing the strings, how they work within the scale going up and down a string, and just feeling uber confident knowing that as you play through whatever it is you're playing. You're using this stuff, you just don't know it. As my mom used to say, teaching nursing back in the day before she retired, you just don't know what you don't know. And it's cool once you do find out what you don't know, because it opens up a whole other way of looking at the thing that you do know. And I really like that. So there we have it, some more intervals for you. Dempster Guitar Studio, I'm Steve Dempster. We'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.